game and the tiebreaker between Orgetorix of Agartha and the Prussian Prince. We have a Jute versus Jute mirror match, and you can see that the Prussian Prince loves his slingers. 6 Nordic hurlers, 6 Nordic horse lords, 6 housecarls, 1 Nordic pike, and the Nordic raid leader with brace. For Orgetorix, he loves his Nordic brigades. He has, let's see, does he have 1, 2, 1? Okay, so he has 3 Nordic band, 4 Nordic brigade, 6 horse lords, 6 royal housecarls, interesting choice, and then he has the Nordic war lord general. He is a brace general, of course. So once again, the Prussian Prince using a standard triple line formation with his general in the back. Now the question is whether he's able to use his Nordic hurlers to good effect when Orgetorix has this many throwaway units that he can just use to... He can just throw them at the front line of the Prussian Prince, start blobbing things up, and the Prussian Prince won't have time to use his Nordic hurlers. Because the issue is, of course, that these Nordic horse lords can't really be used to remove these units. They will eat precursors, and it will open them up to being countercharged by Orgetorix. And if Orgetorix can deny the Prussian Prince the time to use his Nordic hurlers, the Prussian Prince is in a very dangerous position indeed. Because all of these cheap, crappy units will do precursor damage, which is super useful against both cavalry and housecarls. And it could allow Orgetorix to get the all-important charges he needs with his housecarls, because he has a more sturdy line of mid shields, whereas the meat shields of the Prussian Prince are going to lose to the meat shields of Orgetorix. And it's interesting to see the same factions, the same basic idea with cavalry and infantry, because you don't have very many options. But a marked difference in that the Prussian Prince prefers his skirmishers as meat shields, while Orgetorix of Agartha, he prefers his cheap melee infantry, his Nordic brigades and his Nordic bands as the frontline units. Which makes sense. It's very annoying to deal with the Nordic brigades and Nordic bands, because they can be thrown away against enemy skirmishers, they can stop cavalry, precursors, very powerful units to have. Although they are shitty, they perform a very important role on the battlefield. Dare I say, similar to the MLG Freemen, the Gordon Levy Freemen, the Morgan Levy Freemen of Rome 2, just not as powerful due to not having bonuses against anything and only 11 melee damage. They are taking fire here, but the Prussian Prince needs to pull back because he does not want this type of engagement where his Nordic hurlers just get killed by these cheap Nordic brigades. And Orgetorix pushing here, the Prussian Prince pulling away with his Nordic hurlers. So right now the Orgetorix is controlling the pace of the game, keeping his cavalry in very close support here of his Nordic brigade. Prussian Prince pulls back. He wants to spend as much time as he can skirmishing, obviously. But this could allow the Orgetorix to get some nice precursor volleys off. Nordic brigade here gets precursors off, and very, very important kills here by the Nordic brigade. The Nordic brigade gets smashed. Nordic horse lords move in. This is very annoying to deal with. Now the Prussian Prince needs to send in his housecarls. However, this is very dangerous for him because now he engages his housecarls. Their charge bonus is wasted while the housecarls of Orgetorix are not yet engaged. Nordic horse lords coming in here against Nordic band and Nordic horse lords. Again, horse lords taking a lot of damage from precursors here. But the Prussian Prince's skirmishers are fine, so if he's able to somehow get good angles with his skirmishers, could be very dangerous for Orgetorix. Nordic horse lords moving in here to stop these units in the center, and they just... Oh, they managed to do it actually. Very nice use of this one Nordic horse lord unit, crashing into a bunch of housecarls, and getting a lot of kills. Very important unit there by the Prussian Prince. And now the households crash in. The Prussian Prince is going to be first with his households over here as well, but these precursors flying into the households, doing so much damage to them. If these households don't get an attack order, they don't, so they get hit by Nordic Brigade. Nordic Horse Lords into the general of the Prussian Prince. Very, very important charge there performed by Orgetorix. And over here we have households against royal households. The skirmishers of the Prussian Prince really need to start killing stuff, but so much line of sight is blocked, and he's going to do friendly fire as well here. So the general, the Nordic raid leader, is in a bunch of trouble in the center here, especially when this unit breaks. It is unbreakable, so very nicely done there by the Prussian Prince, but once this clears up, the general of the Prussian Prince is in huge trouble. Nordic Horse Lords able to win here, rushing in to get at these Nordic Horse Lords. Very nicely done by the Prussian Prince. But a blob of royal households just broke through. Prussian Prince sending Nordic hurlers in to stop them, and then sending in the Nordic Horse Lords. Nicely done there. And now these Nordic Horse Lords are actually getting chewed up by the Nordic raid leader, and these households weren't able to support. Very important there for the Prussian Prince. But in the center there are a few cavalry units left for Orgetorix, just using his Nordic hurlers here to stop them from disengaging and joining the fight. Very important that this Nordic Horse Lord dies. Very important that this Nordic Horse Lord gets the charge against these royal households. The Nordic pikes are dead, basically. And now the general of the Prussian Prince is not in a good position here, about to get charged here by royal households and a unit of Nordic Horse Lords. So the Prussian Prince's general is dead. The royal households win the day for Orgetorix of Agartha. And Orgetorix of Agartha wins this series against the Prussian Prince by a score of 3 against the Prussian Prince's 2. So it paid out. Having all of these meat shields paid off massively for Orgetorix, I think. And the royal households did a very good job, not because they are much superior to the households, because they aren't. Mainly, I believe, because they got in after the infantry of the Prussian Prince. There was just more infantry, and the pure rush of the Jutes turned out to be more powerful, potentially easier to use as well than the skirmish rush used by the Prussian Prince here, because the Prussian Prince got on the offensive. Orgetorix was able to get the engagements he needed, but it was a fairly close battle, although by the end the increased morale of the royal households might have tipped the scales in favor of Orgetorix. Good game. Strength and honor.